Have you ever heard about a shared resource, maybe like a fishing ground or a communal pasture where everyone knows it's being
Oh,
overused,
yeah,
but somehow national efforts to fix it just seem impossible?
definitely.
Think about the Georges Bank overfishing problem back in '89. That New York Times piece really highlighted how catches of cod, flounder, haddock had just plummeted.
Right.
Yet a national solution, it just seemed completely out of reach, felt like one of those, intractable problems.
It's a classic scenario, isn't it? That feeling that shared resources are just, well, destined for decline.
Yeah.
That human self-interest inevitably leads to ruin. It's a really powerful and often pretty bleak perspective.
That exact perspective is what we're challenging today. Welcome to a deep dive into Elinor Ostrum's truly foundational 1990 book, Governing the Commons, The Evolution of Institutions for Collective Action.
A Nobel Prize winner for this work, it's worth noting.
Absolutely. And our mission here is to outline the major topics Ostrom discusses,
Hmm.
the really entrenched problems she tackles, and maybe most importantly, the surprising, often very effective solutions she proposes.
Yeah, we're moving beyond those simplistic, either ideas about resource management.
To uncover some genuinely counterintuitive insights, hopefully.
Indeed. Because for a long time, the dominant narrative about shared resources was exactly that bleak picture you just painted.
Okay.
It was powerfully articulated by Garrett Hardin in his hugely influential 1968 essay, The Tragedy of the Commons.
Okay, let's quickly break this tragedy down. What was Hardin's core idea? Why did it become such a prevailing thought?
Hardin's argument is quite stark, really. Imagine a common pasture open to all herders.
Hmm.
Each herder acts rationally, in their own self-interest, adding more animals to graze because, well, they get all the immediate benefit from that extra animal.
Right, the profit's all theirs.
Exactly. But the costs of overgrazing, those are spread among everyone. So this rational individual behavior, when it's unregulated on a shared resource, inevitably leads to its degradation. Ruin for all, basically.
It predicts this downward spiral unless something external steps in.
Precisely. Unless there's some kind of external intervention.
It sounds incredibly logical, almost inescapable.
Yeah.
And this grim prediction, it was really reinforced by game theory, right? Specifically, the prisoner's dilemma. How does that connect?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the prisoner's dilemma illustrates exactly the same logic. Individual rationality leading to a collective, suboptimal outcome.
Okay.
In the herd-and-herder game example, even if both herders cooperating, maybe limiting their grazing, would actually yield more long-term profit for both.
The best overall result.
Right. But the dominant strategy for each individual is still to defect, basically, graze more animals.
Because they can't trust the other guy not to.
Exactly. Or they just want that immediate gain.
Yeah.
So it leads to a worse outcome for both, or even the resource just gets destroyed. These models, they powerfully highlight the inherent difficulty of collective action and the temptation for individuals to free ride.
Ah, the free rider problem. Benefiting without contributing.
Yep. Enjoying the benefits of a common good without putting in their fair share.
So these really influential models paint a very grim picture, basically suggesting that without some kind of external intervention, shared resources are, essentially doomed.
Mm-hmm.
And Ostrom had something really crucial to say about how these models were being applied, didn't she?
She absolutely did. Ostrom critiqued the widespread use of these models as overly simplistic metaphors for policy prescriptions.
Bradford, how so?
Well, she argued that reducing these complex real-world common pool resource problems down to these abstract games, it could lead to harmful and overly rigid policies if you applied them without nuance.
Because reality is messier.
Exactly. They often masked the true diversity of actual human behavior and, crucially, the institutional arrangements that people actually create in the real world.
That's a critical point. If you take a metaphor too literally, you miss the real-world complexity and maybe the actual solutions people have already figured out.
Precisely.
And that leads us right into the conventional solutions often prescribed based on these tragedy metaphors. The first one, a very old idea, was that you needed a strong central authority, a leviathan.
Exactly. The argument, echoing political philosophers like, Hobbes, was that a powerful central authority was absolutely necessary to prevent the tragedy.
How would it do that?
This authority would impose rules, monitor users, and sanction anyone who violated them. It promises control order.
Seems straightforward enough, but Ostrom wasn't convinced this was the only way, right? Or even always the best way. What were her critiques of centralized state control?
Well, this raises a really important question.
Hmm.
What happens when the Leviathan isn't perfect, isn't all-knowing?
Which it never is, realistically.
Right. Ostrom argued that this view assumes the central agency has complete, perfect information and infallible enforcement, which is often just not the case. A central authority frequently lacks that granular local knowledge needed for effective management. Plus, enforcement can be incredibly costly.
And prone to mistakes.
Yes. She showed through game theory examples how a central authority, even with good intentions, can make serious errors because it has incomplete or, frankly, unreliable local information.
Leading to outcomes that are actually worse.
Sometimes, yes, outcomes that are suboptimal, or even compounding problems that local communities might have actually solved more effectively on their own.
So the idea of a perfect, all-knowing central authority is often just, well, a theory. It doesn't always hold up in practice.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so that's the state control angle. The other big conventional solution, often proposed as the alternative, was privatization. Just divide up the resource, give everyone their piece.
Right. The thinking behind privatization is that if you divide common resources into privately owned parcels, then individual owners have a direct incentive to manage their specific portions sustainably.
Because they personally bear all the costs and reap all the benefits of their actions.
Exactly. So that should prevent the tragedy within each private parcel.
On the surface, that also seems incredibly logical, almost common sense. But where did Ostrom find the cracks in that solution?
Well, while privatization can work for certain resources, it definitely has significant limitations for others.
Like what?
Think about it. Some resources, like large fisheries or vast groundwater basins, they're physically difficult or just economically unfeasible to divide up into neat private units.
You can't really fence off a section of the ocean, can you?
Not easily, no.
Yeah.
And even where division is possible, it can lead to its own forms of resource degradation. Things like rent dissipation, where the economic benefits just get eroded as everyone rushes to exploit their piece.
Okay.
We see this vividly in the competitive tumping race in groundwater basins like under the Los Angeles area. Even if the land above is privately owned, individual withdrawals still collectively deplete the shared resource underneath.
Because the water itself is still connected, still shared?
Precisely. The privatization didn't solve the core collective action problem for the water itself.
So we're presented with this dilemma. State control often fails in practice. It's imperfect. Privatization isn't always feasible or effective. But this is exactly where Ostrom made her profound breakthrough, wasn't it? She found a compelling alternative.
Absolutely. Ostrom's pioneering work, it really challenged that deeply ingrained assumption that it has to be either the state or the market, that those are the only two options.
And what did she find instead?
Her meticulous research, looking at real-world cases over centuries, demonstrated that stable institutions for self-governance can be created and sustained by the resource users themselves.
By the people actually using the resource.
Yes. It fundamentally shifts the focus to how collective action and, crucially, self-organization can overcome these challenges.
Okay, before we dive into the how, let's just clarify. What exactly is a common pool resource, or CPR, in Ostrom's framework? What makes something a CPR?
Right. Good point. A common pool resource, or a CPR, is typically a natural or human-made resource that has two key characteristics. First, it's hard or costly to exclude beneficiaries from using it. Think of, like, a public park, or the open ocean, or even the atmosphere.
Got it. Hard to put up a fence.
Exactly. Second, one person's use subtracts from what's available for others. This is called subtractability.
So if I catch a fish, that's one less fish for you. If I graze my cow, that's less grass for yours.
Precisely. It's like a shared pie that shrinks with every slice taken. Fisheries, grazing areas, irrigation systems, groundwater basins, forests. These are all classic CPRs.
Okay, so the radical insight is that users of these CPRs aren't just stuck in that inevitable tragedy loop. They can actually figure things out for themselves. What's the deeper implication of this shift in thinking?
Well, the profound implication is that individuals in these complex, uncertain situations, they aren't simply rational egoists, always looking for the quickest way to defect or cheat the system, like the simple models suggest.
They're more complex than that.
Much more. Ostrom observed them as rational appropriators, people capable of learning from their environment, learning from each other, building trust over time.
Uh-huh.
and devising quite complex rules because their own sustained well-being actually depends on the long-term health of that shared resource.
So self-interest gets reframed. It includes the collective good.
In a way, yes. Or at least long-term self-interest requires maintaining the collective good. The interplay of interdependence, knowing you rely on others, and the resource and repeated interaction among users is just crucial for them to overcome these collective action problems.
It makes cooperation possible, even rational.
Right. It opens up this whole new world of inquiry into how people actually govern themselves, moving beyond those limiting assumptions.
This is where it gets really fascinating because Ostrom didn't just say, oh, self-governance is possible. She went further. She identified common features, these design principles that kept showing up in successful, long-enduring, self-governing CPR institutions all around the world.
Exactly. These aren't rigid rules, like a recipe, but common characteristics observed across vastly different cultures and environments.
Okay, so what's the first principle she observed?
The first principle is clearly defined boundaries. This means two things. The boundaries of the CPR itself, like what area of forest or which part of the fishery are we talking about, and the individuals or households who actually have the rights to withdraw resources from it must be clearly defined.
Why is that so important?
Well, the problem it addresses is uncertainty. If you don't know who's in and who's out, or what exactly is being managed, it's basically impossible to manage effectively or prevent outsiders from exploiting the resource.
Makes sense. You need to know who belongs and what belongs.
Right. For example, she looked at the Alanya inshore fishery in Turkey. There, only registered fishers with permits were allowed to participate. Clear boundaries.
Got it. Okay, principle one, clear boundaries. What about the second?
Second, there needs to be congruence between appropriation and provision rules and local conditions.
Okay, that sounds a bit academic. Break that down.
Sure, it basically means the rules for using the resource. How much water you can take, how many animals you can graze, when you can harvest timber, and also the rules for providing for the resource, like contributing labor for maintenance.
Uh-huh.
Those rules should closely match the specific local conditions, the characteristics of the resource itself, the climate, the social context.
So one size doesn't fit all.
Definitely not. This prevents inefficiency and ensures fairness, because rules that work perfectly well in one place might be disastrous in another. They need to fit the local reality.
Can you give us a concrete example of that congruence in action?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Let's go back to those Spanish huertas, the irrigation systems.
Okay.
Their water allocation rules are incredibly specific. They're adapted precisely to the local river conditions, the type of soil, the historical needs of the land parcels.
Wow.
These rules can even change based on the season or how much water is actually available in the river that year. It shows this really high degree of localized adaptation that prevents disputes and makes sure the water is used efficiently.
Okay, so clear boundaries and rules that actually fit the local context. What about the process of making those rules? Who gets to decide?
That brings us right to the third principle, collective choice arrangements. This one is crucial. It means that most of the individuals who are actually affected by the operational rules must be able to participate in modifying them.
So the users have a say in the rules they live by.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This isn't just about fairness, though that's part of it. It's really about legitimacy and effectiveness. When users help create the rules, they're far more likely to see them as their own, understand them, and actually follow them.
It fosters buy-in.
Huge buy-in.
Yeah.
And it also allows the rules to adapt organically over time as conditions change, because the people on the ground know what needs adjusting.
Okay, so it's not top-down imposition, but genuinely collaborative rulemaking. What's next for making sure everyone actually adheres to these collectively chosen rules?
Right, because rules are only good if people follow them.
Okay.
That's monitoring, the fourth principle.
Who does the monitoring?
This is key.
Yeah.
Often, it's the appropriators themselves, the users. Or it might be individuals who are directly accountable to the users, maybe elected guards or officials.
So peer monitoring, essentially.
Often, yes, or community-based monitoring.
Yeah.
They actively keep an eye on both the condition of the resource, is the water level okay, is the pasture overgrazed, and the behavior of other users. Are people taking too much? Fishing out of season?
And why is this so critical?
Because without effective monitoring, free riding and rule breaking can just run rampant, right? If people think they can get away with it, the whole system can unravel pretty quickly.
Like in the Spanish huertas again.
Exactly. They have elected officials, sometimes called ditch riders or inspectors, whose job is literally to patrol the canals and report any rule violations they see.
Okay, monitoring is essential. And what happens when someone does break the rules? What kind of consequences did Ostrom observe in these successful, long-lasting systems?
That leads to the fifth principle, graduated sanctions. This is really interesting. It means that users who violate the rules are subject to sanctions that usually start pretty light.
Like a warning.
Yeah, maybe a warning or a small fine, maybe public shaming in some communities. And then the sanctions increase in severity for repeated or more serious offenses.
So it's not like zero tolerance, one strike, and you're out.
Generally not, no. This flexible approach isn't just about punishment. It's really about fostering compliance and maintaining community cohesion. It gives people a chance to correct their behavior without immediately alienating them or breaking the social fabric of the system.
It encourages people back into compliance rather than just kicking them out.
Exactly. We see this in examples from Japanese villages with fines for offenses, or the Alanya fishermen had a system of warnings before they escalated to harsher penalties like temporarily suspending fishing rights.
It sounds like a system designed to encourage compliance, not just to purely penalize. Okay, but what about when conflicts inevitably arise? Which, they always do when people share anything valuable.
Absolutely. Conflict is inevitable. So for that, we have the sixth principle, conflict resolution mechanisms.
What does that involve?
It means there need to be low-cost, easily accessible, usually local, mechanisms for resolving conflicts among users or between users and officials.
Why low cost and accessible?
Because if it's too expensive or difficult to resolve a dispute, people might just let it fester or resort to other means, right? This is vital to prevent disputes from escalating and completely undermining cooperation.
Makes sense. You need a quick, fair way to sort things out.
And the famous Tribunal de las Aguas of Valencia in Spain is just a stunning example. This local court, composed of elected farmers, has been resolving water disputes quickly, publicly, and authoritatively for centuries,
How quickly?
often within minutes. They meet weekly, hear the cases, and render judgments right there. It demonstrates incredible stability and effectiveness in conflict resolution.
Wow, centuries of swift local justice. That's a powerful testament to their design.
Okay, and the next principle sounds absolutely vital for their very existence, especially long-term. It really is. The seventh principle is minimal recognition of rights to organize,
Meaning?
meaning the rights of the resource users to actually devise their own institutions, their own rules and governance structures, should not be challenged or undermined by external governmental authorities.
So the national or regional government needs to basically let them manage their own affairs.
To a large extent, yes. Many of these successful, long-running, self-governing systems have endured for centuries, precisely because external governments didn't interfere too much with their internal governance.
And if they did interfere,
Well, if an outside force can just sweep in and overturn local rules arbitrarily, it completely removes the incentive for people to invest their time and effort in self-organization and building trust and managing the resource for the long term. Why bother if someone else can just change the game tomorrow?
that's a crucial point. Allowing that local autonomy to actually flourish seems key.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 7. What about for really large or complex systems? How do they manage things across different scales?
Right, because not all CPRs are small and local. For very large-scale systems, Ostrom identified the eighth principle, nested enterprises.
Nested. Like Russian dolls.
Kind of, yeah. It means that governance activities are often organized in multiple layers. You have smaller, local units managing specific sections or tasks, and these units are then nested within larger organizations or federations that handle broader issues, coordination, or conflicts across units.
So you have governance happening at multiple scales simultaneously.
Exactly. It allows for self-governance to function effectively at various levels, matching the scale of the governance task to the scale of the ecological or social system.
Any examples of this?
The Philippines Angera irrigation communities are a fantastic example. These are often organized in multi-level federations. You have local units managing specific canals and water allocation, and then broader councils handle issues affecting the whole system, like maintaining the main diversion dam or representing the community to outsiders.
So it allows for both local control and large-scale coordination. Those 8 principles together really paint a remarkably clear picture of how these self-governing systems can function and endure.
They do. They provide a powerful analytical framework.
Let's bring it to life a bit more. Can you share some of the standout real-world success stories Ostrom highlights? Cases that truly demonstrate these principles in action over long periods.
Oh, definitely. The book is packed with compelling empirical evidence. The Swiss mountain meadows and forests in places like Turbel, Switzerland, are just a prime example.
How so?
For centuries, literally centuries, communal tenure over vital grazing land and forests has been managed there. They have detailed written rules going back hundreds of years, locally elected officials, and clear graduated sanctions for things like overgrazing or cutting timber illicitly.
And they've lasted.
They show incredible long-term stability and adaptation. It's living proof that the tragedy isn't some iron law of nature.
Amazing. And these aren't just isolated European examples, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Asia.
Absolutely. The Japanese irrigation villages, places like Hirano, Nagaike, and Yamanoka, also have incredibly long-standing traditions of communal governance for their vital irrigation systems.
What characterizes them?
You see shared ownership of the diversion works, the dams and canals. You see elected officials managing things. And they have really complex, sophisticated systems for allocating water fairly and monitoring use. Their success really demonstrates how local autonomy, coupled with clear, self-imposed rules, prevents costly disputes and ensures the resource is sustained for generations.
And we touched on them already with conflict resolution, but the Spanish Huerta irrigation institutions seem like a particularly powerful example of this kind of self-governance.
They truly are iconic. These centuries-old self-governing irrigation communities around places like Valencia and Murcia, they're famous for things like the Tribunal de las Aguas we mentioned. They show how local, elected bodies, composed of the farmers themselves, can effectively manage incredibly complex water distribution systems with remarkable stability over centuries. They use detailed rotation systems, known as turno, and have various local officials like herederos and syndics overseeing things.
It's just mind-boggling that these systems have worked for so long. And one more example you mentioned.
Yes, the Philippines Zanjera irrigation communities. Another robust case.
What's unique about them?
These are highly self-governing organizations where the farmers often jointly own and crucially maintain the irrigation works themselves through required labor contributions known as ATAR.
Ah, so provision rules are key there.
Very much so. And they have incredibly detailed rules for water allocation too. It just exemplifies how strong internal organization and this deep sense of shared responsibility can lead to really successful collective action in managing complex resources, again, over generations.
So Ostrom presents all these compelling successes, but she doesn't shy away from looking at why things sometimes go wrong, does she? She contrasts these successes with institutional failures. What's the key takeaway when comparing success and failure?
Right, analyzing failure is just as important. When Ostrom examines cases of failure like certain Turkish inshore fisheries that collapsed, or those Californian groundwater basins facing the competitive pumping race, she consistently finds that one or more of these crucial design principles were either absent from the start or they were undermined, often by external factors or policies.
So, for instance, in the California groundwater case.
Well, the initial lack of clearly defined boundaries for the water resource itself and the absence of effective, locally driven monitoring and collective choice arrangements meant that individual self-interest did lead toward collective depletion. The institutional framework needed for self-governance just wasn't there or wasn't allowed to develop properly.
So the presence or absence of these principles really matters.
It seems to be the critical difference, yes. The difference between success and failure often lies in whether a community has or can develop and maintain these robust institutional design principles, and critically, whether they have the autonomy to adapt their rules as conditions change.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us, for you listening? If we connect this to the bigger picture, Ostrom's work seems to fundamentally shift our entire understanding of collective action, doesn't it?
It really does. It powerfully challenges that old deterministic idea that humans are inherently doomed to destroy any shared resource they touch.
Or that the only possible saviors are a powerful top-down state or complete privatization.
Exactly. Her work shows those aren't the only options. These cases demonstrate how ordinary people, when given the chance to organize and govern themselves, and when certain institutional conditions are met, those design principles can develop incredibly complex, effective, and enduring institutions.
It highlights things like trust, shared knowledge, local adaptation.
Absolutely. Over-rigid, top-down, one-size-fits-all approaches. Her work offers this profound, empirically grounded counter-narrative to the inevitability of the tragedy. It shows the potential for human cooperation and ingenuity.
So as we finish, here's a thought to leave you with. What stands out to you about these principles? If communities could effectively self-govern complex resources like water systems and mountain pastures for centuries using these ideas, how might we apply these lessons today? Where might these design principles inform how we approach modern shared resource challenges? Maybe things like global climate change or managing shared online communities, or even something closer to home like your local park or maybe a neighborhood association. Where else do you see the commons and the potential for governing it in our world today?